This lesson is about watercolor techniques. The goal was to teach the students about different techniques of watercoloring, specific ones, wet on wet, wet on dry, dry brush, what does blowing with a straw look like, what does adding salt look like, things like that. We didn't want to get too many techniques in there because we're just starting small, how to use watercolor paints versus acrylic paints. A lot of the students usually view things as paint is always the same no matter what medium it is. So once the class was all set up with their paintbrushes and all the tools they needed, I walked around and demonstrated one technique at a time, and then the students mimicked that on their own paper, adding their own colors, but trying to follow that technique. Once we went through all the different techniques, we then practiced combining them together, and that was one of our assessment forms to see if on your own can you combine two different techniques together. Can you identify the two and then put them together in one space? They didn't have to create anything special, they were just playing around with the paints at this point to see what they could come up with. As we went along, I found that the most important thing that we did to set up the class was the rules and procedures. How do we get more water for our cups? How do we hold our paintbrushes? Keeping in our own space. What is a paper towel and how is it used and how is it beneficial? Having those different things set up in advance and talking about them and reviewing them as we went along really helped the organization of the classroom and helped the kids start to take ownership of their art and their system. They could figure out, what do I do if our water cup is black and how do I take care of it? Things like that. It was really important. The kids had a lot of fun with this part. This lesson extended into 2 days. On the second day, we brought back out their oil technique papers that we'd filled out, and they used those as a reference to fill out their skeletal systems for what we've been doing in science. They had 5 pages they needed to paint. Each page needed to have watercolor technique on it. Overall, they had to use at least 2 water techniques, whether that was adding salts, blending, whether that was wet on wet, wet on dry, dry brush, whatever they wanted to do, but in their skeleton, they needed to have at least 2 techniques being used. And then they told me about them. After they dried, we then cut them out and assembled them. And this way I was able to get both a summative assessment for art and for science. It was a great project and the kids had a lot of fun with it.